Hey everyone, we are going to start talking about the respiratory system today. So we'll obviously start off with a great comic, really funny, yeah. Anyways, so how things are going to work for this, we are going to cover the first part of your notes today, so the parts of the respiratory system. We're going to go over all of these things. You're going to fill in your notes up to where this video stops, and then you are done for today. So just to go along with this video, as I'm explaining, I'm going to use a diagram. So I have the diagram over here. Your diagram's a little bit different and is farther along in the notes. So don't worry about filling any diagram in right now. This is just a visual to help you understand the different parts of the respiratory system. So we'll start with the structures and their functions. So just skipping over this part right now, this is just talking about the conduction zone, which we're going to come back to later. I just wanted to include it so that you had an introduction to those terms of different zones of breathing. So anyways, the first part of the system is called the nasal cavity. So that's this space right here. This is the best place for air to enter the body. While air can come in through the mouth, so that would be right here, there is special hairs actually that filter and clean air when it's coming into your nose, and the nasal cavity helps to warm up the air so that it's a little bit safer when it comes into your lungs. So you can breathe in through both the nasal cavity and through the mouth. It's just a little bit healthier to breathe in through your nasal cavity. The air then continues over the uvula, which is a small piece of tissue that blocks food from entering the nasal cavity. So you can see here that there's availability, I guess, for lack of a better word, for air to go in both spaces, meaning that there would be availability for food to come up into the nasal cavity. If you didn't have a uvula, that would be a potential issue. It's similar to, or it's, I guess, it is the same thing as if you were ever drinking chocolate milk or water and one of your friends made you laugh and you had chocolate milk come out your nose. That's why your uvula didn't quite work. So moving on from that, the first part of the breathing tube is called the pharynx. This is also known as the throat, and it's the pathway for air to the trachea. We then move down into the larynx, which is known as the voice box, which creates sound. Air continues on into the trachea, which is also known as the windpipe. So we have the pharynx, the larynx, and the trachea. So there's a small piece of tissue that protects the trachea, which is called the epiglottis, which is right here. When you're swallowing, the epiglottis covers the trachea, which forces food or water down the esophagus rather than letting it go into the lungs. So when you're drinking and you sputter or cough because something went down the wrong tube, your epiglottis actually failed you. So we're going to take a quick look. Just a heads up, this video is kind of gross, I guess. It shows someone swallowing and air being trapped in the I think it's, the larynx here. So if you don't want to watch this, feel free to just skip over this part. You don't have to watch this. If you are interested, you can definitely check out the link to see more. So I'll just show it here. As you can see, this person swallows, and right there, food was stuck in the pharynx, right here, and then the person coughed and ejected it back into their esophagus. So anyways, you're welcome to check that out. Again, kind of gross, but kind of interesting. So let's continue on. The bronchi are these two large branches here. They're the first branches of the trachea, and they lead into these smaller branches, which would be called bronchioles. After the bronchioles, or bronchioles, we go and lead into very small sacs that are called alveoli. So it's actually in our alveoli, where I don't really have a good zoom or close-up of it on this diagram, but they're at the end of each of these bronchioles. So it's the alveoli that are the place for oxygen and carbon dioxide diffusion. I'm not sure if you covered this a little bit with blood circulation, but if you have, that's great. If you haven't, this is actually where, when you get the blood coming up into your lung, or not blood into your lungs, but when you want oxygen and carbon dioxide diffusion, this is where it happens. So the smallest part of the alveoli are the pulmonary capillaries. I know you've talked about that. And as their name describes, they're small capillaries in the alveoli, and they're where oxygen diffuses into the bloodstream and carbon dioxide diffuses out of the bloodstream. This process is called external respiration. We're going to come back to this term of external respiration a little bit later, so if you're not quite sure about that right now, don't worry about it. The last thing we're going to cover today is talking about the support structures that allow you to breathe. Okay, so the first thing we'll look at is the lungs. We can see here we have one lung, two lungs. The right lung actually has 3 lobes and the left only has 2. So your left lung is a little bit smaller because it has to leave room for your heart. Your heart takes up space in your chest cavity, so your lung is actually a little bit smaller on your left side, one less lobe. Then another key part for breathing is the diaphragm. This is actually the muscle that allows you to breathe. So your diaphragm is right along here and it's in a resting position in this arc shape. When the diaphragm contracts, it actually pulls your lungs down slightly and allows for air to rush in from a low pressure or an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. So after your diaphragm pulls down, air rushes in, and then your diaphragm relaxes, going back up into this arc shape, and air comes out. So we'll talk about the diaphragm more later, just giving you a brief introduction to it now. The intercostal muscles assist the diaphragm, especially when you have forced breathing. They're not on this diagram, but it's just the muscles around your rib cage. They help when you are like forcing air into your lungs, taking a really deep breath, or helping when you're forcing air out of your lungs. The pleura is the membranes that surround the lungs to help separate them from the chest cavity wall. You need space. Your lungs aren't pushed right up against your chest cavity. There's space for them to expand. And finally, to protect all of that, we have the ribs. Those aren't on this diagram right now. This is the diagram that you're going to fill in later. You don't have to fill this in today, but you can see all these different aspects that we talked about. So a little fun fact, the intercostal muscles are what you are eating when you're eating ribs. So I put yum, but I'm not sure if that's really yum. Anyways, so that's all you're going to cover today. If there's any questions on any of that, let me know. Make sure you're getting comfortable with all this terminology. It's all very important and we're going to use it all later throughout this unit. See you later.